Okay, what to say about my next guest, other than she is truly one of my heroes. She's our most distinguished Irish person on the world stage, highly regarded for her work on human rights. She's as busy as ever and just back from a high-profile humanitarian mission to the Horn of Africa. Please give a very, very warm welcome to former President and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson. Everyone loves you in the stage. Massive respect. They always feel the glass is too full, okay? But just to start off on Somalia, I suppose, because that's where you've been recently. And I want to just show a piece that was on the news very recently of your visit. So let's just roll it there, Niamh, and have a look at this.
For Mary Robinson, it was an emotional return to a country whose plight she championed at the height of another famine in 1992.
I've never been able to get Somalia out of my skin, if you like, since I was here in 1992. And when I look around and I see yet again, and these are very resilient people, and they want the best, they want just food and water initially for their families.
That was Jim Fahey, obviously,
yes.
reporting Tuesday night.
He's done a great job. He really has. You know,
yeah,
he works so hard because after all the, you know, that he has to go and file, and you know, I was really impressed.
Were you as, or even more upset this time than when you went in '92, or was it just the same?
I think I was more upset because it's worse this time for a number of reasons. First of all, Somalia hasn't had a proper government since I was there over 19 years. There's a lot of conflict internally, and in a way, because there is Al-Shabaab, which is linked to Al-Qaeda, it's kind of tainted with the terrorism, and we don't address the issues and help to develop a governance. And secondly, the Horn of Africa has had the 8 hottest years ever. So climate is beginning to have an impact. We can't say yet it's all climate change, but it is beginning to have an impact. And so this kind of drought and flash flooding, rather than proper seasons, is going to be more likely. And it won't be 19 years next time that we'll have the same issue of severe drought. And we need to really address this through helping pastoralists, helping rural communities, helping those who have possibilities of living off the land to have coping mechanisms. And we need to do a lot more. And I was very conscious that the last time I was there, which they reminded me of, was in October of 1992. And that means it was the end of that long, hot summer, and things were very bad in Baidoa and Mogadishu, but the rains were going to come. Now we're in July, and there will be no rain until at least October, and no local harvest until at least December. So, you know, the crowds coming to the refugee camps are going to continue to come. They're going to continue to be in need. And I hope that there will be a realization we cannot have thousands of children dying of starvation. It is inconceivable. And therefore, you know, the Irish people, in fact, have been very generous. Irish aid has been very good for the last few months. They've been anticipating. Britain has been very good. Some other European countries and the United States could do more.
Why did you go back, actually, Mary? Because I remember interviewing on my radio show not that long ago, and it's like you were going to maybe take things a little easier, but you obviously felt compelled to go back.
Well, I was asked by the aid agencies, by Concern and Trócaire, who've been working in Somalia for the last 20 years, and Oxfam Ireland. I'm honorary president of Oxfam. And in fact, it was quite good because we showed a collaboration between aid agencies, who, after all, are also competing for funding and, you know, have to make their pitch. But we had a press conference in Nairobi at the end where I was with 3 heads of those agencies, and I think we presented a very good image of Ireland, a caring country which, with its own memory of famine, caring a lot about the poor, unfortunate women, children, the elderly, who are absolutely desperate and who, you know, have a great need of our support.
And maybe is that an image of us, of Ireland, that we need to put out there, because the image of Ireland of late has been so poor?
I think it is one of our strengths that we have consistently been very attuned to how to work in the poorest countries. We don't come in from the outside in a heavy way. We listen and make it very holistic. When I was with the health centre in Dullo, and they showed me photographs of when I was there 19 years ago, it's the local district board that's in charge, and Trócaire just provide all the resourcing. But the thing is, you know, just one point that stuck with me, they were measuring very malnourished children, weighing them, measuring their upper arm, and clearly they needed the plumpy nuts, which is a very neat packet that they can take without water. They just take it straight from the packet. They were giving 2 plumpy nuts for each malnourished child, but they were giving enough for 2 weeks. So that's, you know, 2 a day for 2 weeks. And in theory and in practice, if the young undernourished child eats those plumpy nuts, they will gain weight. And they weren't, a number of them weren't gaining weight because, of course, other children in the family, even the mother, was sucking from the plumpy nut because they're starving. You know, and at that level, it's really distressing. Yeah. I have to say, I haven't slept that well since I came back because it's very much in my mind, you know.
I mean, is there a sense in which you can't get those images out of your mind, or...?
It's very hard, yeah, it's very hard. They remain there, and of course they're such a dignified, likeable people. And I have a very good friend who in fact was in the audience at the press conference, Asha Hagi. She's a powerful Somali woman, and she's the founder of the 6th clan, because women weren't allowed to be members of the 5 clans. And this would be more than 10 years ago. She formed the 6th clan and was part of peace talks then. And things looked reasonably hopeful, but since then they've slid back a bit. And, you know, I was talking to her and she said, maybe this is an opportunity for the Somali people in this worst time to come together more. And I was really impressed by her.
And then sometimes, because I want to talk about Ireland now, and I even feel guilty sometimes because whatever or how bad we are here with our troubles, it's obviously not comparable to those little children who are starving. But when you come back, I mean, you were the president who put that light in your window, and when you come back and you see so many young people having to emigrate, what does that do to you?
It is very tough at the moment, extremely tough, and I know that especially in small towns and villages, stores are closing, people are really in a very bad way with mortgages, etc. I must say, I didn't really warm to the Celtic Tiger, bubbly sort of, I didn't think that was the Ireland that, you know, I had very much grown up in. There was something very strange about it all, and we've learned a bitter lesson. And I think it's a lesson that will be something that will be a great strength to us in the future, because I don't think ever again we will allow that sort of bubble type activity. You know, it was a big mistake by banks, by developers, by even people taking out mortgages, 100% mortgages, when they knew that they would have difficulty maybe if the property in any way dropped. But nobody thought property was going to go down and we would have negative equity.
And by leadership, by government as well. I mean, a lot of people would blame the top.
The lack of regulation. But now I think we're showing remarkable resilience. Things are extremely hard, but people are sort of gritting their teeth and saying, you know, this is it. And we've had good news, thankfully, in recent days of some lifting of that debt burden. And I also see more neighbourliness, you know, the spirit of Mehel that I was so impressed with in the early 90s, when we were getting more, you know, when our economy was growing, but there still wasn't enough money for the government or the local authority to be doing everything. People were ganging together to provide clubs and opportunities for the elderly and for children. I think we're in the same thing now. We have to help each other.
Do you think, though, I mean, do you feel anger at all about what happened?
I do, absolutely. And I understand the anger. I do, very much so, because the lack of regulation, the cronyism, the whole thing was terrible. And it is a great shock still to us, I think, to know how quickly we went from thinking that we were doing well and being admired for doing well into really hard times. And those hard times are not spread evenly. Some people are suffering much, much more and, you know, can't sleep at night from worry about how to pay the next bill.
Yeah, and you could see that the other day, and it's, you know, there was a meeting of guys who put all their savings and they were all taken away. But I remember also you spoke very fondly recently of Garret FitzGerald, because he was a leader, I suppose, who didn't let people down, but he always remained optimistic, I felt, even towards the end. Did you?
Well, you know, it seems a strange thing to say, but I thought that the fact that Garret died during that incredible period, when we had the historic visit of Queen Elizabeth II, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen impeccable in the way that she was using symbols and moments to convey a great deal, and then a wonderful speech at the state dinner. And we were waiting for President Obama to come, which is always, again, very important when a President of the United States comes, particularly somebody like President Obama and his wife, Michelle. And we might have just, in a way, taken that at a certain more superficial level and talked about this will be good for tourism. But Garret dying at that time reminded us of the best of us. He reminded us of how much he had worked over so long to develop good relations and build a peace process. And the Anglo-Irish Agreement, which I didn't agree with at the time, but it was an important step, you know, and it could be built upon. And just his whole way of living, and right to the end, his articles in the Irish Times, his contributions. I would meet him coming from Russia, going off to in New York, and always, as you say, with that kind of optimism about who we were and what we were. And he was deeply knowledgeable about the Irish language, about our history, about everything that, you know, is part of an identity of a people.
He meant a lot to you personally, though, didn't he?
He did,
you're a stateswoman, but you're also, I was think, quite an emotional woman, and he did mean a lot. Why did he mean so much to you personally?
I think he did right through, but in the latter years, he used to come down a lot to our hinterland in Mayo with his son Mark and family, and we would meet a lot. We would meet with Enda McDonough, we'd have mass in his lodge, and then have lunch together, have drinks or whatever. And I saw the Garret, that was such a family man, adored by his grandchildren. And yet we were always having these really interesting and serious conversations. I learned so much from him.
Right from the beginning. And the lovely thing is, he always forgave you for the Anglo-Irish Agreement, didn't he? He never held it against you.
He never, even right at the time, because he was always interested in somebody who had views that they could stand over. And I knew why I didn't agree, because I felt the unionists in Northern Ireland wouldn't be able to accept that agreement. So I have a rotten cold, so...
Oh, no, you're very kind. Now, I always thought you were going to go back to Mayo, like about a year ago, and garden. You do a bit of gardening, don't you? And your grandkids, you have 4 grandchildren you love. But you're staying as busy as ever, aren't you?
More or less, I think, because I feel very compelled. For the last 8 years when I was in New York, I was kind of working to show that human rights makes a difference in practice to good development, and that was working well. But I wanted to come back to Ireland, and more I was seeing that in the African countries we were working in, people would say, ah yes, but we've no seasons anymore. It's got hotter this year. We don't know when to sow. The food security is worse. And I realized this was also a very big human rights issue. So I have now the Foundation on Climate Justice. And I think the thing that means most to me now was to have been asked to become one of the elders of Nelson Mandela. That was about 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years ago now. And it's a sort of example of the kind of moral authority which interests me much more than political influence, because it's a different kind of role. It's a little bit like the role of the President, a little bit like the role of High Commissioner, because you don't have a power of enforcement or big guns to call upon in any political sense. And we do a lot of work. I was recently with the elders in Ethiopia looking at the issue of child marriage. And it was really shocking to see in Amara, the district of northern Ethiopia, that the average age of marriage of girls is 12. And, you know, we had 8- and 9-year-olds who were married to men of 40 or 50. And it's a sort of arrangement that's made without consulting the girl. And I talked to a 15-year-old who'd been married for a year, and I said, just to kind of draw her out a bit, I said, and what was your wedding day like? And she said, I had to leave school. Oh. And that was it for her. And, you know, from then on, she's a sort of chattel in the family. And the elders are helping to form an alliance against child marriage. And it's these sort of areas where it's possible to try to use the moral voice.
Well, I know when you were made one of those elders, everyone in the primetime office, everybody was so, like, proud. I think the thing about you, Mary, is when I said you're coming on, enormous respect, and everyone feels really proud of you. You are a moral authority, and thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Well, of course, one of the problems is Nick goes around saying that he's a nursemaid to one of the elders.
That's a good line, but he's always been there for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mary, very much for coming in tonight. Mary Robinson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.